It's incredible how a few words can change the mood of an entire class. Within moments, my happy, chattering 9th grade class, enjoying the post-exam lull before the end of school, turned into a tense, whispering mob, frantically thinking through past actions and future possibilities. It turns out, in a school, there's a word that can stun a class silent: plagiarism. So let me take a step back here and give you some context. Right now, we find ourselves in my 9th grade government classroom on May 19th, 2017. Field day. People are streaming into the room in brightly colored attire. The teacher, a squat man in his early 30s, quiets the class with a wave and asks for a definition. What is plagiarism? Someone raises their hand and volunteers one. Plagiarism is using someone else's words or ideas without proper citation. Good, the teacher snarled, because you're one of the only people in the room who didn't plagiarize the last assignment. For the next few minutes, in a profane rant, the teacher accused 75% of the class of plagiarizing a recent mock Supreme Court assignment. He was like a madman, throwing papers across the room. There are maybe 5 of you that I am not recommending to be expelled, he screamed. Get out, he finished. I can't bear the sight of you anymore. Now, a week later, we were getting our papers handed back by the vice principal. Most of us got our essays with smattered sentences highlighted. There was a supplemental sheet listing the websites we had supposedly copied these sentences from. In the front, there was an assignment to recover some of the credit. Write an essay admitting you plagiarized and redoing the assignment. Now, when we checked the documents, it turned out that not one of the cited sentences appeared on the websites the sheet said they did, not one. Bafflingly, the school had just issued a massive indictment, pronounced us all guilty, and suggested that we confess to our crimes to recover credit, and they hadn't even bothered to check if the sentences were even there. It took almost a month to get a full retraction and apology, but the damage was done. What could make a school abandon all logic and reason and suggest a remediation assignment like something straight out of the Crucible? What could make them abandon the concepts of due process and presumption of innocence in a government class of all places? It turns out there was a sinister force in play, the plagiarism lobby, because the teacher had used something many students may be familiar with, an online plagiarism detector. So for those unfamiliar with such, it might be useful to go through how an online plagiarism detector works. Either the student or the teacher submits a piece of text to the scanner, which then checks it against its database, highlighting sentences, phrases, or words, and reporting a level of similarity between your text and another one. Sounds innocent enough, right? Actually, no. The detectors are far from perfect. Many can't differentiate between simple cliches and actual copied phrases, especially the cheaper ones used by teachers with fewer resources. The detectors also have far more powerful search tools than would be available to a student. For example, the detector that decided the fate of my class was able to, among other feats, translate a web page from Russian to find a partial match. And missing with all that power is any ounce of common sense in what it's finding. We were writing opinions and briefs about the death penalty, but the detector was able to highlight sentences, none of them matches, from completely unrelated articles, like one on field mice and one from Yahoo Beauty. The software is simply unable to differentiate between what is a related sentence from a credible source and what is not. So the common arguments for plagiarism detectors go like this. Sure, they're not perfect. They come up with wrong matches, but nowhere does it say that this is plagiarism, it just says that this is similar. And then the teacher has to use their own best judgment to decide what are actual cases of plagiarism and what are not. Some teachers have even claimed they use plagiarism detection software as a tool to teach citation to their students and not to send them to the principal's office. Now it's true, most softwares don't deliver a direct indictment. But if you were a teacher who constantly had to read reports of percentages of similarities between your students' text and other text, and you notice that one student maybe has consistently a higher percentage, or there was a sudden spike, you might come to the conclusion that that student was plagiarizing, where actually that student could just have been doing more varied research or making more varied use of cliches. But because you had to investigate that student with a ton of unwarranted data, you could jump to a conclusion. Coincidences become patterns, and anomalies become indictments when a teacher repeatedly has to read whether their students may or may not have been plagiarizing. In the Constitution, we have a ban on search or seizure without probable cause for just this reason, that investigators tend to lose perspective when investigating specific wrongdoing. But the entire concept of a plagiarism detector is based on preemptive checks. Think about that. We're offering more protection to suspected murderers in our society than we're offering to school children submitting an essay. And this is not even to mention that what might seem like a cribbed sentence on the surface might simply be due to a lack of creativity rather than a real intent to copy. When offered this explanation, my government teacher, the plagiarism accuser, scoffed at the possibility as a 1 in a trillionth chance. Well, maybe if you took each word as an independent variable of which there are infinite permutations, this might be true, but we were writing about a relatively common topic, which must have hundreds of thousands of papers to its name. It's not possible that anyone got the same wording. And in addition, the plagiarism detectors are perpetuating the fallacy that it would be possible for a student to take one sentence from this website and one sentence from this website and then paste it all together in their essay like a collage, which would be totally pointless and ultimately ridiculous and makes no sense if you spend just 2 minutes thinking about it, something my school administration never bothered to do. But again, when faced with so much data, patterns emerge that do not exist. And all this while, we're relying on the assumption that all teachers are good people who are genuinely trying to protect their student. Most teachers are excellent professionals. I've been blessed to have quite a number of tremendous teachers. But as you already know, I had one malicious teacher who criminally misused a ton of data without checking it whatsoever. The point of good systems is to be secure, no matter who gets their hands on them. By pointing out vague or unverified similarities, the plagiarism detectors are enabling potential bad actors to use this data as a smear tool. And as for the argument that plagiarism detectors can be used to teach citation, a detector can't teach you to be creative or original. It's not powerful enough. It can simply teach you to make your sentences or paragraphs sound less like something that would be picked up by a plagiarism detector, which defeats the purpose. And in addition, it's not the responsibility of the student to make sure that nothing they write matches anything in the massive database of knowledge of the plagiarism detector. So speaking of which, what is this massive database of knowledge? Let's start with this question. Why do you think plagiarism detectors operate? Is it just good, community-oriented people trying to purge the evil plagiarists from our gene pool? No. These are companies trying to turn a profit. You're paying for the subscription. They're earning money when more people sign up. And why do people sign up? Because they're more worried about plagiarism. Maybe from recent incidents, which were maybe found on the same online platform. So as you can see, the plagiarism detectors have a monetary incentive to find cases of plagiarism so they can sell more people their plagiarism detection software. But they can't just make up cases, right? It turns out the plagiarism detectors have an ace up their sleeve. What do you think happens when the detector has finished checking your essay and spitting out similarities? Does it then just travel into the void? That's what we all might assume. But in fact, for many plagiarism detectors, including the largest, Turnitin.com, which we use here at SAS, your paper will be stripped of your name and retained in the database. There it will sit. It will be used to check all future papers that come through Turnitin.com scanner. And the papers just accumulate and accumulate. As of 2013, Turnitin.com was taking in 300,000 new student papers every single day. It had a database of over 400 million student papers. And every future paper that goes through Turnitin.com scanner will have to be checked against this database, which grows every day. Now, there are a number of immediate problems with this, starting with the blatant misuse of intellectual property rights. But the biggest problem is that by submitting a piece of writing to Turnitin.com or other plagiarism detectors, you are contributing to the toolkit of a company monetarily invested in finding you and your peers guilty of plagiarism. Now, this is the point where defenders of plagiarism scanners clench their fists and insist that this is all unfortunate, but we do have to deal with the real cancer on society, which is plagiarism. And I won't deny that cheating does happen, but how much of that are plagiarism detectors really picking up? Doing some research, I came upon an article from National Public Radio discussing the controversy. It's a typical article of the genre. It starts with a few watered-down concerns and ends with a rousing exhortation against the plagiarists. Anyway, in that article, without a hint of irony, I found this graph on the source of Turnitin.com content matches in 2013. So 32% of the matches come from the web, where teachers could do web searches to see if there was any copying. A vaunted 6% come from Turnitin.com's vaunted collection of books and less accessible documents. But surely the most shocking statistic is the 62% of matches that come from other student papers. Think about that. Are we really supposed to believe that there's some massive, non-internet-based cabal of students sharing papers so brazenly that 62% of papers come from other student papers that a normal schmuck wouldn't have access to? Or is it far more likely that when you keep 400 million student papers in your database about relatively similar topics, you're going to get quite a few wrong matches? Unwittingly, the graph I showed deconstructs the idea that plagiarism detectors are actual effective tools at catching plagiarists. They're grasping at straws, and for some reason, we're buying it. What could make us as a society so gullible that we fall for this con? The plagiarism detectors, it seems, have tapped into a deeply ingrained fear of plagiarism, so strong that we don't even dare discuss it. When the faulty software suggested that there might have been plagiarism in my government class, the teacher and administration trusted it so strongly that they didn't even bother to check it. Not wanting to seem soft on plagiarism, they outdid themselves to generate fall outrage and suggest ridiculous punishments. Okay, you could say that that's just my crazy school and things like that don't happen in real life. Want to bet? Check your own plagiarism policy. Likely in the first line are the words 0 on the assignment. Somewhere in there is recommended for expulsion. Likely nowhere is any sort of description of any appeals process. That's not a courtesy plagiarists deserve. So you might say, okay, a 0 on the assignment is perfectly reasonable for people who've been accused of academic dishonesty. But as Turnitin.com readily admits, a lot of what it calls plagiarism is actually unintentional. For example, you cite a source and then paraphrase, but don't change the phrasing enough. And we're folding in new things by day. Copying your own words and ideas is plagiarism. Making a citation error is plagiarism. Sharing notes on an open note test is plagiarism. I even heard of a case where someone was cited for plagiarism by accidentally stapling the front page of someone else's paper onto the back of his while turning it in. Theoretically, the point of this plagiarism paranoia is to protect original creators, but in many of these cases, it's unclear who we're protecting. You might say that it's not all the same thing, but where do we draw the line? We can never teach citation and sourcing if we accept the premise that the tiniest error leads to a 0 on the assignment, a permanent splotch on your record, and a step on the path to expulsion. There are incredible social and legal taboos attached to an accusation of plagiarism. To get admitted to the bar, many times you have to answer the question, have you ever committed or been accused of an act of academic dishonesty? And in this age where records last forever, there may be no escaping a Turnitin.com match from 10th or 11th grade. In many cases, punishments for plagiarists are worse than they would be for bullies. Think I'm joking? The political arena has been full of cases of politicians taking a hit after an accusation of plagiarism. Monica Crowley was forced to withdraw from the National Security Council after allegations that she plagiarized parts of her book. Dr. Ben Carson's presidential campaign took a hit after it was speculated that he plagiarized parts of his book. Montana Senator John Walsh was forced to suspend his campaign for a full term after someone reported that he had plagiarized his master's thesis at the National War College. Most famously, in 1988, then Senator Joe Biden was forced to suspend his presidential campaign after it was suggested that he'd taken a few lines in a speech from another politician. He was then forced to admit he'd gotten an F in a course in law school for allegedly plagiarizing a term paper, further sealing his fate. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that all of these incidents were unintentional or even that they're not disqualifying. Rather, I'm trying to say that we don't really care if these incidents are true, and they have very real consequences. So maybe we should stop throwing out that word so lightly or relying on faulty software to give us answers. Indeed, in the case of Carson, the so-called plagiarism could be attributed to sloppy editing or citation, but certainly not intentional copying. Did the BuzzFeed reporter that found this so-called plagiarism use a plagiarism detector? I would bet on it. And we rationalize this rush to judgment by saying that plagiarists are the worst of the worst. They're white-collar criminals. They're the reason that people like me can't get ahead, you might say. But this sort of thinking is what real due process and proper procedures, along with a more common sense definition of an infraction, is supposed to prevent. In fact, I'd imagine a fair number of you in the audience right now have from the beginning been trying to suppress the suspicion that there might have been plagiarism in my government class, or I might be a plagiarist myself. In fact, some of you, more vindictive of you, might not be trying to suppress it at all and are currently trying to scribble down portions of my speech to run through your plagiarism detector when you get home. This is despite all my assertions to the contrary and no evidence for this fact, but the odiousness of plagiarism is so strong that we convict on first suspicion. And we have to fix this problem. It's not just a matter of false accusations with life-altering consequences, though that's a big enough problem on its own. We're seriously losing something as a society when we're so afraid of working with each other's text that we just stop building and collaborating with each other. We wonder why kids in the 21st century are losing the ability to work in groups. Just look at what our schools are teaching them about working with someone else's text. When you put such high stakes on citation, it's far more likely that I will ramble incoherently without your source than expose myself to the incredible legal perils if I do. And that's not good for anyone. No one would accuse Edison of plagiarizing the light bulb from the lamp, or Shakespeare for plagiarizing Romeo and Juliet from Paramus and Thisbe, but under the ridiculous standards that we hold ourselves to today, both those works could be nixed as derivative. If you think about it, our entire innovation culture is based on acts of plagiarism and building on each other. It doesn't make sense that we're so mortally afraid of it. Famed screenwriter Aaron Sorkin, when questioned about his writing style, said, "Good writers borrow from other writers. Great writers steal outright." The irony was he was stealing as he said it from T.S. Eliot, who said, "Good writers borrow, great writers steal." The secondary irony is I took the above quote and summary from a Huffington Post article titled "How to Steal Like a Writer." Not perfectly, but close enough for a plagiarism detector to pick up. The upshot is I don't really care because it was well put, and I shouldn't have to cite that article for pointing out an obvious and unoriginal fact, nor should I have to make my sentence more convoluted just to avoid borrowing the phrasing, or as Sorkin and maybe Eliot would say, stealing it. True, we want original work from students, and copying outright is not okay. But original work gets better when we collaborate and build on each other, not worse. Collaboration is going to be a hallmark of our success in the 21st century, and that has to start at our schools. We have to do away with the ridiculous assertion that all 70 to 75 million students in the US should write basically the same 10 to 15 set of papers in high school, and not one should have a single sentence, idea, or word that matches any other. Our classrooms have to be about research and discussion and collaboration, and yes, citation up to the point that it doesn't impede the first three. And just to add some pressure, we don't have that much time left. Currently, the internet's about 20 to 30 years old. Imagine what it'll be like in 50 years. What about 100? At some point, there will be no sentence or paragraph that I can write that has not been written by somebody else before. In order to continue coming up with ideas in the 21st century, we have to throw away the plagiarism detectors and say, yes, use my thoughts, use my ideas, use my words. We can't make this world better unless we build on each other. It's time to move past our fear of plagiarism and embrace the culture of collaboration that will propel us to new heights in human achievement. Thank you.